This week on Local Film Talk, we're chatting with Taylor Shain about his upcoming documentary, Running Vision. To get this episode first, subscribe to the Local Film Talk YouTube channel, and if you don't have time to watch it, subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Now let's get started, folks. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Local Film Talk. This is the show where we talk to local filmmakers here in the Triangle about the projects they're working on, hopefully get some tips and tricks that you can use on your own projects. I'm your host, Bob Walters. My co-host, Conrad, couldn't make it this week. I think he's in witness protection or something, but he'll be back next week, so don't worry. We got a great episode for you this week. I chatted with Taylor Shain, who's a local documentarian out of Durham. He just recently completed a documentary about an ultramarathon runner who ran a 183-mile race across Puerto Rico. And he's getting ready to distribute that. So we had him on to talk about some of the challenges he faced, some of the things he learned, hopefully give some advice to you guys that you can use if you try to make a documentary. So, excuse me. So this is a really great conversation. I enjoyed having it, and I think you'll enjoy listening to it because we had a lot of fun. Let's go ahead and get some business out of the way first. I got posters. That's right. If you're watching the video feed, you can see that I have posters in the background. You guys finally delivered. Thank you. Thank you very much to the two filmmakers who provided me with posters in the background. If anybody else out there would like to see their work right here behind me, of course, these frames are 11 by 17. It does not cost you anything to get these on the wall behind me. You just have to get me a poster, get it to me, get it to Conrad, send it to the office, and you could see your work up here. So let's talk about the people who have gone ahead and provided us with some posters. Over here, we have one from My Dumb Face, the latest short film by local director Nick Beery. You might remember him from several of our episodes on the Carborough Film Festival. He's the director of that festival, and he's been working for quite a while on this 24-minute short film. It's a drama. It's hard to really describe. It's about a young girl going through some changes in her life, some changes in her family, and deciding what kind of person she wants to be. And he had the premiere of it at the Varsity Theater in Chapel Hill on Franklin Street earlier this week, and I got to attend, and it was just a really awesome film. I suggest you guys go and check it out. You'll see it's a lot of people we know were involved, a lot of friends of the show. So you can go and see their work. It turned out really great. It looks super professional. It's a really interesting story. It's got some great humor and drama. I can't recommend it enough. My Dumb Face by director Nick Beery. Go out and see it whenever you have a chance. Pro tip, I believe it is having its local debut next month, the end of April, at the Eastern North Carolina Film Festival. So if you're interested in seeing My Dumb Face, you can check it out there. And then over here on my other side, I mentioned last week that Conrad and I were producers of a sketch comedy group called Zero Headspace. And they had their premiere show at the theater in the park this weekend. In fact, they're actually having their very last show right now. Friday, yesterday, and today, they had their first shows, and Conrad and I attended on Saturday. It turned out great. The audience was awesome. The place was packed. The audience laughed. I thought the show was terrific. The actors did a great job. Turns out we got a couple good reviews in the paper. So all in all, everything went really well. I'm really happy with it. I'm really proud of the work that everybody put into it. Hopefully we'll have some recorded sketches on the YouTube channel you can check out soon. And there should be more live shows coming up. So be sure to check that out. But one of the people who attended the show was our buddy Mike Howard, who you might remember from several episodes as the director of Where We're Meant to Be. He showed up and he brought me a poster for the movie. So we have that here, and thank you, Michael, for providing that. Where We're Meant to Be has its premiere, I believe, next weekend at the Cary Theater. It's open to the public, but I believe it's already sold out. So if you don't have your tickets already, you're probably not going to be able to get into that one. But fortunately for you, the end of April, Eastern North Carolina Film Festival, Where We're Meant to Be, will be screening there. So I recommend, you can already go there and see my dumb face. Go there and also check out Where We're Meant to Be. I've heard a lot of great stuff about this one. Again, lots of people we know are involved in this. They all do great work. I'm sure this is no exception, and I encourage anybody to take any opportunity they can. Go check out Where We're Meant to Be. Need a drink. So, what do we have coming up? These are the events that Conrad usually takes care of. On April 2nd, Peak City Film Festival in Apex, North Carolina. Go ahead and get your tickets now. That's only like 2 weeks away. Go and check that out. And the next day, April 3rd, Evan Kidd, who you'll remember from being on our show a couple times, Evan Kidd has the premiere of his first feature film, Son of Clowns, happening at the Cary Theater. This one is also open to the public. But I believe, I don't think that one's sold out. I think you could just walk up and get tickets to that one. And I encourage you to, because Evan's a great guy. Everything I've seen and heard of this film looks pretty cool. So I encourage you to come and check that out. April 3rd at the Cary Theater. Let's see. End of April. I don't have the exact date on me. You can look it up. Go do a search for Eastern North Carolina Film Festival, but that's coming up at the end of April. And, I already mentioned My Dumb Face will be there, and Where We're Meant to Be will be there. Son of Clowns, Evan Kidd's movie, will also be there. Just go, just go to the Eastern North Carolina Film Festival. You get to see all this great stuff. And then on May 19th, Triangle Film Community will also be screening a feature film, anthology feature film called Fever Dreams by local filmmaker Rob Underhill. It's, like I said, it's an anthology. I believe it's 3 shorts. They're all written by Al Julian, who's been on our show before. And Rob, you'll remember from one of the videos, our episodes from the Carborough Film Festival. So again, come out May 19th, another opportunity to support great local filmmakers. And I think that's about it. That's everything on the list. A lot of cool stuff coming up, lots of opportunities to come out and meet some great people and see the work they're doing. So I hope you guys come and check that out. So now, without any further ado, let's get on to my conversation with Taylor Shain, talking about his documentary, Running Vision. Like I said, it was a great conversation. We had a great time having it, and we think you'll have fun watching it. So enjoy. This is something that I always find interesting with documentaries, and I'd like to hear, go ahead and tell the audience your story, but how usually a documentary is about an interesting person. There's also ones about interesting events, like a lot of the Ken Burns stuff on PBS, but a lot of documentaries center around interesting people. And so share us the story about how you found your subject and what you found so intriguing about him.
So I was working part-time at a running store. And Jason also worked. He was working maybe 4 hours a week or something like that, just to I think kind of get out of the house or a little bit and maybe take advantage of that employee discount type of thing.
There you go.
Yeah.
Because those running shoes are expensive.
They are expensive, man. You could spend $200 if you wanted to.
Yeah, it's like the first time I bought running shoes, I'm like, I could buy 6 pairs of sneakers for this amount of money. Holy crap.
I think just meeting him at the store, just making small talk. I was like, hey, so do you like to run? He's like, yeah, I run a little bit. Kind of just underselling his accomplishments.
The king of the understatement.
I know. And I think one day on the news, I saw there's a news story in is running around a local park for charity, basically. And so I watched a little video, and it turned out it was Jason, the guy. I was like, oh my gosh, I know this guy. I didn't know he was blind. I didn't really know he was an ultra runner. He was running 100 miles around the park. He wanted to do it within 24 hours. And I think the park was around it ended up being 40 laps around that one park. So he was doing that for he was raising money for a nearby school for the blind.
Okay.
So I went over there. It's I ran a couple laps with him. And just talking to him there, he told me he was going on this cool race in Puerto Rico, and he was looking for someone to maybe come make a video about it. I thought it would be kind of cool. And I was like, Jason, I can do that. So about 1 month later, I went to Puerto Rico and shot the movie.
And so that's Running Vision. Is you're chronicling his race from what was it, the east to west, right?
Yeah, the easternmost point to the westernmost point.
Right, which was, I believe, 183 miles.
Yeah, total distance 183 miles. There's a 60-hour cutoff there, which was pretty tight.
Which I think we all know is mathematically defined as crazy. So yeah, that's and also running across Puerto Rico, very hilly, very mountainous. So it's not like 183 miles flat. It's also he was running on the road, so I wouldn't call it uneven terrain, but definitely for those of you who do not like uphills in your running, there's a lot of it.
Oh yeah, there were a lot of hills. It was also hot and humid. I think that was just the two biggest challenges: the heat, humidity, and the hills.
Right. Well, that's something that I was interested in. Like we were talking about earlier, I do some running too, not ultras or anything. I've done a couple half marathons. I'm working my way up to a full. But I've learned a couple different things along the way. And one thing I know is that there are, different environments call for whole different sets of training and preparation. Obviously Jason had the benefit of training up in Colorado, where you're at least a mile above sea level, which is always beneficial. So Puerto Rico is going to be closer to sea level. That'll be beneficial for him. But Colorado is also pretty dry. Puerto Rico, on the other hand, very freaking humid. And like I did the half marathon I did last weekend for here in North Carolina, it wasn't all that humid. It's way worse in the summer. But there were people from other parts of the country just complaining about the humidity and everything. I'm like, oh, you got to be used to it. So, did Jason have any way of preparing for that kind of stuff?
Yeah, and then the weeks leading up to Puerto Rico, he actually went to a 24-hour fitness, and they had a steam room there where he could you kind of go in there and like do some workouts in the steam room to try to like get used to the humidity.
Wow.
But I think it's just kind of something hard to get used to. And also because of the humidity, he ended up having some trouble with blisters too, which in Colorado, it's not really a problem. For runners,
really, even when you're running the distances that he is.
Yeah, I mean, well, for there are a lot of runners in Colorado, I'm sure, who struggle with blisters, but Jason never really struggled with that. And it really was because of the extra moisture there. If you're in a moist environment, like it creates kind of a good condition for your skin to get irritated pretty more quickly.
Well, and one thing that I've had, mild experience with is what happens to your toenails when you do a lot of running. And so even though I was expecting it, about halfway through the documentary, when he took his shoes off, that was like, oh God, no, I don't want to look at that. No. For those of you who are not familiar with running, it will do a number on your toenails. And in the case of an ultra marathoner, or this is like a double ultra marathon, it really did a number on his feet.
Oh yeah, and there is a scene near. I don't want to spoil anything, but there's a scene near the end when he rips off a toenail.
Yeah, I remember that one. Man, no.
Everyone has that reaction who watched it. I had a lot of people who told me, like, when I was like going through rough cuts, people were like, "Oh, you got to take that out. That's so gross." I was like, "That's why I got to keep it in." It's so
right. That's running for you, Yeah. Oh man, yeah. It's every now and then I'm like, hey, once I finish my marathon, maybe I could try some longer distances. And then I watch a scene like that, and I'm like, nope, not doing that. So,
yeah.
So what you ended up making, it kind of fits into a couple different categories. It counts, I would say there's, there's a category of documentaries that are about disabled people. There's the sports documentary category. And then there's also travel documentaries, and you kind of covered all three in one, which is interesting. You kind of got a lot of balls up in the air. You know, different genres you kind of have to service. So I guess my first question is, had you watched a lot of documentaries in those categories before? Were you a fan of those kinds of documentaries before, or were you just kind of making this up as you go?
Before I got involved in the project, I probably maybe watched like one running movie, and I might have watched a couple other kind of like the human interest side of it. But after I kind of like talked with Jason and we both like agreed to do this project, I like made it kind of my mission to watch as many running or adventure movies as I could before the race. I was kind of surprised by how many running movies there are about endurance events out there. And really, like in the ultra running community, there are a lot of people who, you know, they might have gotten into drugs or some other kind of struggle in life, and they've kind of turned to running as like a way to like kind of get over. It's kind of their version of therapy, I suppose.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that there are a lot of really great stories there. And while like
can you recommend any in particular that you really?
Yeah, there's one. Yeah, there's one on Netflix now. It's called the Barkley Marathons. It's about a 100-mile race in Tennessee, and it's just a really challenging race. It's not really like it's not really a story about like one particular person, but it's more about the overview of a couple different athletes going on that race.
Okay.
Also, a Charlie Engle, North Carolina resident, was in a couple movies. One, I think, Running the Sahara, and another one, Running USA, where he's literally running across the Sahara Desert in Africa.
Wow.
Another one where he ran across the United States.
Okay.
Those are both pretty interesting stories as well.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So what were some things that you found? You know, obviously you're like, all right, I got to do this documentary. I got to kind of do a crash course in what's out there. What did you, what were some of the defining elements that you found, some of the common elements about documentaries on these various topics? And what did you decide you wanted to do to make yours stand out?
I have this theory about like movies or like stories. I call it like the cooking contest theory. And I take like a character like my movie, for example, is about Jason Romero. And I say, what if he wasn't running? What if he was entering himself into a cooking contest? And I kind of ask myself, like, would this still be interesting if it was something like as mundane as like baking muffins? And I kind of think like, yeah, I think it's still interesting because it's not really about like the running part. It's about like a person going through a series of challenges.
Right.
It's like, yeah, like, okay, if you can't see, he's on all these challenges cooking, then it's got to like, you know, he's retired in his career, and this running's like a chance, like almost like a second career, and it's all these challenges in his life.
Mm-hmm.
In the movie, he tells stories about like how like when he was a kid, a doctor told him he couldn't work, and then he ended up becoming a lawyer, and stuff like that would resonate like in a cooking movie as it would in a running movie.
Right. He's still an interesting character no matter what he's doing.
Yeah, so that's my kind of like test I take before I kind of take on a project. And in running movies, I do think, so yeah, I guess does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, and that certainly answers the question about what your angle was and what you thought you could bring with this story. Was there anything in your research that you kind of like, maybe some cliches that you saw that you're like, I definitely want to avoid that, or maybe things that gave you pointers that you didn't realize before?
I felt like the only kind of like the most important thing I thought was a lot of those movies in the beginning of the movie was always a little bit slow, but as soon as the movie like the runners started the race or started whatever challenge they were going on, whether that's running across the Sahara or going to like a specific race, the movie got picked up and it got interesting. So with my movie, with Running Vision, I wanted to make sure I could like kind of start it at the beginning of Puerto Rico as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense. Kind of jump into the story as quick, and that's probably like a screenwriting 101 lesson. But
right. That's kind of Quentin Tarantino approach. Tell things a little bit out of order. Like you said, if the movie gets or the momentum of the movie really begins when the race starts, then go ahead and start the movie with the race and find a way to use flashbacks and interviews to fill in the backstory during the during the movie throughout.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I did. I found during the race, with the movie during the race, as he has challenges, I usually took those moments like flash back to like a story about his childhood challenge or
right.
challenge with his kids or something.
Right. Now, one thing that I haven't watched a lot of running documentaries, but I imagine there's a lot of montages in them because a race lasts a long time and you don't want to watch the whole thing. So did you have any, and obviously Running Vision has a few montages. Did you have any experience doing those, or did you have to figure that out for this project? And, what did you learn about doing those?
Honestly, I didn't really, I honestly haven't really done many montages until Running Vision. But it was kind of something that, like you said, I probably had to do to like show the passage of time. Show, oh, he's at mile 15 now. Now he's at mile like 20.
Right.
But it was really, I think they ended up working out because it did help convey the story. There's one montage near the end where like in the scene before the montage, he was kind of struggling. He was lying on the pavement. And during the montage, he builds strength and like it shows him going from like struggling, and then he finally gets into his groove. And so I feel like that one really worked.
Right. No, because there was actually story happening during the montage. That was, I thought that one was good.
I feel like that's probably the key for any montage or any like scene. Like you said, it's still got to continue the story. It can't just be mindless running. Nothing's happening.
Right. Now, did you have any, because you did have multiple montages, did you try to attack them in different ways based on where they were appearing in the movie or what the subject matter was, so it didn't get repetitive?
When I first started this one, I was worried like, oh man, people are going to watch this movie and it's going to be a guy running and it's going to be like, okay, he's still running. How do I keep this interesting? But right. I ended up I made an outline for the movie after Puerto Rico. And I basically just kept the kind of the good news, bad news rule of like screenwriting, where you have like a happy moment, and you have a moment of conflict, another moment of happiness, another moment of conflict going.
Right.
And what turned out is I think in between some of those moments was where like a montage might occur. Right.
Now, we've talked a lot about running movies. As I mentioned earlier, this is also kind of a travel movie. Did you have much experience with international travel before? Was this your first time out of the country?
It was my first time out of the country. And Puerto Rico is actually still technically part of the United States.
Right.
But it does feel like a different country. And for anyone who's ever traveled with film stuff, it is going to be a little bit tricky just because you got a lot of stuff to carry, and it's a pretty good chance you'll get stopped by security and they'll like dig through it. I think it's more of an inconvenience than a burden, I would say. So if anyone is looking to travel with film, I'd say it's probably not as bad as you're thinking that it would be. Also, because I was going to Puerto Rico, I was a little bit worried about mosquitoes. And there is a bug spray you can get. They sell it for fishermen a lot, where it doesn't have plasticides that would eat away your camera gear. So if you are going to travel to a tropical place, I'd say go for one of those bug sprays.
Okay. Was there a particular one, like a brand or anything you used?
I don't remember the brand I used, but if you look for ones that like fishermen use.
Okay. No plasticides.
Yeah.
Okay. So anything you learned, any tips you would offer people for, traveling to do a film shoot? Like you said, it's not quite as intimidating as you would think, but is there anything you can do to smooth the process? Is there any way you can I don't know, lay out your equipment in your bag to make it easier for airport security to not have to comb through everything? Do you have tips for packing your stuff so that it doesn't get damaged? Because I could tell you personally, I would be petrified to check my camera under the plane. You know, having seen some of those guys heave the bags onto the conveyor belt, I'm like, I'm not putting my couple $1,000 camera in those guys' hands.
Oh yeah, I probably would not check your bag with your camera.
Right.
I'd probably carry that on. I think I had it in my lap or at least under my seat most of the time. And I'm guessing most people who would travel would do that with something like on that type of project.
And unless they had the big, you know, bags with the foam and all that stuff. Yeah, the actual gear cases.
And a really nice Pelican case.
Right.
Which I didn't really have. I ended up I have a pretty small camera bag, and I ended up renting 2 lenses, and I remember being barely able to get everything to fit. I had a DSLR camera. But I would say like I think I did pad it a little bit. I used some of my clothes to pad some of the camera gear. So I guess that's a good tip.
Right.
I would also recommend not leaving your battery charger at the airport. If you go shoot. That's probably the first big mistake I made on this project.
Oops.
Yeah, and I charged, you know, all my batteries before the trip, but on the morning before I'm leaving for Puerto Rico with Jason, I was filming at his house. I was like, oh, I'm just gonna top off my battery at the airport while we're waiting and doing nothing, but ended up leaving the charger in the outlet.
Oh man! So you had to buy a new one when you got to Puerto Rico?
I did, yes. I didn't even notice that I was missing it until like 24 hours later. So we flew into Puerto Rico on Wednesday. I think the race started that Friday morning. So Thursday afternoon, I realized, oh man, I don't have a battery charger. I'm gonna need one to refill it in the car, to recharge some batteries in the car. I ended up going to 3 different electronic stores. And I actually I don't speak Spanish. So
I imagine Puerto Rico does English pretty well, right?
Yeah, if you don't speak Spanish, you're probably able to get around Puerto Rico okay. But it would help a lot, though.
Right. Always better if you can. So I'm curious, you said you had to rent 2 lenses. We were talking about renting equipment in a couple episodes ago, but I'm curious, when you rent equipment, I assume you rented it in the States before you left.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have to tell them, by the way, I'm traveling internationally with these? Does that affect the rental agreement or the cost or anything?
No, I don't think the way you use it really affects the cost. I think like if you rent it, and unless you check the box that says like I want to purchase the extra insurance on it, $10 or however much it is, I think say I go international, I lose the lens or something, then I would be responsible for replacing it for the company.
Right. I just kind of wonder if you're like, yeah, I'm going to do a documentary on the war in Afghanistan, and I'm going to be like riding around in Hummers and everything. Are they like, we might not get this lens back, so that's going to double your cost?
Oh, I'm not really sure about like, I feel like if I was going to a war zone, that might be, don't ask, don't tell. I use Lens Pro to go for my stuff. I feel like they have the best rates for me.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard good things about them.
Yeah, but I never saw like are you doing anything dangerous with our equipment option?
Right. So you only have a month to throw this thing together.
Oh, yeah.
Most people prep for months, if not more than that. What was it like, having to do everything on such a contracted time frame?
That month was bananas, but it was incredibly fulfilling. I tried to schedule as many interviews as I could with Jason leading up to the trip. I think the first interview I did with him actually ended up not being that good. I think he was a little bit nervous and a little bit like kind of a up on the podium type of thing. It wasn't really as natural as I think we both would have liked.
Right.
I think the second interview, much more natural, much more comfortable. And I feel like that's probably true for a lot of documentaries, where sometimes it takes time to get comfortable with it.
Right. You have to get comfortable, or your subject has to get comfortable with you so they can feel free to act natural in front of you and in front of the camera.
Yeah, exactly. Of course. And it is hard to, because it is an awkward situation when you're like, I'm sitting here with the camera, I got a couple lights. And I actually didn't really have a crew with me. I wish I did, but usually you might be a couple other people there, and everyone's looking at that one person. And building comfort, it's some people are just kind of natural and it doesn't really matter, but sometimes you gotta work a little bit. Sometimes you gotta maybe ask questions that are a little more open-ended, kind of let them talk, get comfortable. Other times you might just have to like reschedule another interview in a maybe more comfortable environment.
Right. Well, and I know there are people who, in making a documentary, getting back to the idea of months and sometimes years of preparation, there are people who will use the tactic of, spending a lot of time just getting comfortable with their subject and letting the subject get comfortable with them, so that by the time they start filming, it's a lot more natural. You didn't have that luxury, so I imagine that's got to make things even a little more awkward, that not only is every interaction you have with him probably geared, revolving around this project somehow, but you're probably doing it a lot. Like really often.
Yeah. And I think there was one day when we first kind of agreed to it, I went to Jason's house and we had a meeting about the movie. And while I was there, and to this day, I think the most energetic and passionate I've seen him was that one meeting, and the way he was talking about, I got all these challenges in life, but I'm not giving up. Just the way he was saying it, I remember thinking like, wow, I wish I had my camera here. Mm-hmm. So I almost wonder like if sometimes time getting comfortable, it might even be like maybe that person just, you got to get them on a good day too sometimes.
Right.
I almost kind of wish like I would have. Of course, if I set up an interview that night, it might have been awkward still.
Right. Well, and again, if you had a longer period of time, you have the option, you do an interview, he's not having an on day, so you can schedule another one later on and try to get him on a good day. But when you only have a month to throw all this stuff together, it's kind of like, all right, are you free Tuesday? We're doing it Tuesday. Please be in a good mood on Tuesday, because that's the only day we got.
Yeah, I guess so. And I also filmed him training a couple times. He spent a couple mornings. I really wanted to get him running in the snow. I was kind of adamant about that. I was like, in Colorado, or in Denver, there's not always snow on the ground in the wintertime. The sun comes out the day after a snowstorm sometimes.
Right.
And the funny thing was, we probably shot training footage for him in 3 days. I might have used like 20 seconds of footage from those 3 days in the movie. Right. Just kind of funny, because before the trip, I was like, oh man, I got to get this pre-race training footage. I need this. I guess that's just how documentaries, or I guess film in general, works out.
Right. So that's a question. You obviously, it's a 60-hour race. You took 51 hours to run it. So I know you got at least, you only had one camera, right?
I brought 2 cameras actually.
Okay, but you were only recording one at a time.
Yeah.
Okay. So you got at least like 50 hours of the race, and then probably some time before and after in Puerto Rico. And I guess you got a bunch of hours of this stuff in the month ahead of time, getting interviews and stuff. How much footage would you say you got overall?
In Puerto Rico, I filled up I had a 500 gigabyte hard drive, and that was from footage from a Canon 60. I actually never counted like specifically how many hours I had. I had at least 50 hours of footage, but I also had a lot of time-lapse footage too, so right. It's just still images. So I'm not really sure how you would count the hours on that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how that works. Like, how exactly does your camera do time lapse? Is it just like a shot every minute or 5 minutes or whatever the time frame is, or is it actually shooting video and compressing it somehow in camera?
So I kind of and if anyone out there is listening is a time lapse expert, you might be laughing a little bit, but I shot it on the Canon 6D, and I basically shot still images. I had an intervalometer. So I set so I space out each shot a couple seconds. So basically, I ended up with a bunch of raw photos. And anyone in production knows a raw photo is going to be like 20 megabytes per photo.
Right.
And then in post production, then combine them in post into like the video format.
Right. That's pretty high definition stuff. You're talking about how many megapixel are those shots?
They ended up being like a 20 megabytes ish for the Canon 6D.
Okay. Well, I was wondering about the resolution, because if you're taking still photos on a DSLR, you get a pretty huge image. Did that allow you to kind of like you hear sometimes filmmakers will shoot in like 6K when they're planning on editing the movie in 4K or something like that? You can also shoot in like 2K and edit it down to 1080, but that gives you a whole extra amount of room in the frame to move it around. Were you able to take advantage of this huge canvas and actually move the camera in Premiere around to get some camera movement within these shots?
Yeah, I totally did, and that was kind of the fun part of it. I was also shooting on RAW. You can always change your blacks or your whites a lot later in post. That's always pretty convenient.
Right.
Yes, yeah. I shot a lot of like sunrise or sunset stuff. So sometimes, one big bright spot is the sun, and everything else was black. So it's kind of nice to have those extra exposure points.
Right. I was curious because you did get, I thought you got some really great night shots, especially in the time lapse stuff. You said you were using a 6D.
Oh yeah, I was so I shot a lot of time lapse of the stars. I've never really done star photography before, so that's another thing. And up to the race, I kind of wanted to learn and figure out how to do.
Okay. Any tips you can share with the audience for doing time lapse?
Yeah, I love time lapse stuff. I think it's so cool. It's such a fun, creative trick having your camera bag. So for I guess starting with star photography, so you're gonna have some pretty long intervals, because if you're shooting the stars, you often you need to make sure you can expose it bright enough.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what you would do is you would set your shutter speed would be like, it might take 10 seconds for one photo, basically.
Right.
So
yeah.
in general, I'd say if you really want to do time lapse, just kind of got to practice. And it's really just space them out every couple of seconds, space out each picture. Besides that, it's just like any other kind of photo or video. I think for landscape stuff, it's depth. So you got the mountain, you got some clouds and the sky, and there's like a couple layers of depth to keep it interesting.
Okay, so add foreground and background elements to give it some depth and keep it interesting.
Yeah, totally. But I guess you could say that about any other cinematography too.
Right. So the race actually gets underway. Talk a little bit about covering a 180-mile race over the course of, what was it, 2.5 days? Did anybody get any sleep during that time?
Not really. So Jason slept for 4 hours over those 3 days. I slept maybe a little bit more than 4 hours. It was pretty tricky to sleep unless he was sleeping, because if he's running, like give him food or give him water. I keep so the race began at like 6 a.m. When I was shooting that, the only camera I had was a GoPro, which I taped to the back of my bag because Jason needed someone to pace him in the morning because it was so dark, and he needed a guide in front of him.
Okay.
And I almost kind of regret not shooting that with like a real camera or shooting that with a real intention of getting good cinema.
Right.
You know, you watch my movie, you remember the beginning scene? It was kind of cool. Everyone's hanging on the coastline. There's a sunset in the background, and it's like there's kind of some crappy GoPro footage. It is the only thing I got capturing it.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's part of the part of the documentary process of covering an actual event is, sometimes the equipment you have or the equipment that you're using is done out of necessity. There's like a lot of times when you're doing more of a historical documentary and you have to piece together stuff that was shot a while ago, you could be piecing together dozens of different types of formats. So I don't think anybody's going to hold it against you that there's some GoPro shots early on.
Gotcha.
And honestly, I didn't, I wouldn't say there was anything in there that I looked at and said, wow, that looks like crap compared to the rest of it. I think your cinematography was fantastic.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad you liked it.
So you're in the car with his mom, who is, supporting him, driving along, providing water and food and stretch breaks and all that stuff. How does that affect your ability to shoot things? Was she trying to stay right next to him the whole time, and you had to say, can we get a little bit front, a little bit behind so I can get a variety of shots? Did you ever have to say, drive me up 100 yards so I can get out and get a shot of him coming at the camera and then come pick me up and then we'll keep going? What were some of the logistics involved in doing that when you have one crew or one person in your crew?
I was pretty much worried about that entire 51 hours. So at the beginning of the race, our car was behind him for the most part, and occasionally we could drive up next to him and like shoot him doing some video. But there were also some other runners there and some other crew vans. So there were moments where I wasn't always able to be next to him. That was a challenge. At the end of at the
beginning, were you kind of able to tell yourself, oh, he's got another 175 miles. I'll get plenty of footage there.
Yeah. I was still worried about capturing the race there. I was like, I want to capture this now. What if I'm just really tired, or what if my camera breaks, or what if he doesn't finish? And
right,
I also,
you have a very different documentary if he doesn't finish the race.
Yeah, it would have been an interesting story. We talked earlier about all those different other running movies. I still haven't seen a running movie where the character didn't finish.
Right.
I'm kind of curious to see if there would be one out there.
I'm sure there are. I wonder if there are people. I wonder if it's just a decision that's made in the process that if they, maybe they started out designing it as a documentary of, look how this person was able to overcome or succeed or whatever. And then when they don't, it's like, well, we don't have the way we shot all this stuff. We don't have any way to rejigger it into something that'll work as a, well, at least he tried kind of thing. Or maybe they just decide that, the person not finishing isn't inspirational enough, so they don't end up putting it out. I don't know. That is weird. You'd think you'd have more of those.
Yeah, I feel like you could still get a pretty good story that way. It would still be like, because it's easy to be inspirational when someone like succeeds at something, but what if it's like the race is their failure? I feel like it could be interesting in a different way, kind of seeing how they react to that, and maybe the inspiring part is that they got up and tried again.
Right. Well, and it's a 183-mile race. If he makes it 160, 100, or like 150 or more miles into it and then has to drop out, is it a failure? He did not finish the race, but I don't think anybody's going to call him a sissy and a quitter for only running 150 miles.
Yeah, and I think I remember Jason actually kind of addressed that issue. He was like, on these races, like there's always a moment where you kind of like feel an urge to drop out. Like he did say like if people didn't no one would hold it against me. No one would say that. But like, I think he would hold it against himself. And I think they think that's kind of what you would have to do to run at like an elite level. You'd have to hold yourself responsible to that. Like,
Right. Well, I run and you're a runner too. And, there is that moment during a race where, you're aching and you're tired and you're trying to catch your breath and you're thinking, I really want to stop right now. But, I have not, collapsed on the ground yet. Clearly there's something left in the tank. So the decision to stop right now would be mental.
yeah, totally. And honestly, I kind of like this process of the movie was also a little bit of inspiration for myself too, as like a filmmaker. I mean, before this movie, I was working at the running store. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I guess it kind of turned out that all I had to do was pick up a camera and go make a movie.
Right.
It's easier said than done, but I feel like now, like, okay, I feel like I could do almost anything.
That's really awesome. And, like I said, it turned out really well. It's about 45 minutes long, I think.
That's correct. Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the editing process. Did you learn, we've talked a little bit about montages and time lapse and all that stuff, but were there, this being your first, long form documentary, was there anything you learned in the editing process, editing a big documentary with that much footage that, I mean, I'm sure it seems daunting when you have hundreds of hours of footage. What advice could you give for someone who's, finished the production and staring at those, gigs and gigs of files going, how am I going to whittle this down into a great movie?
Oh man, I would say don't be afraid to ask for help or to invite to your team. Because I spent maybe after Puerto Rico, I probably spent 2 or 3 weeks just transcribing the interviews and not really going, I had all the footage backed up and stuff, but just most of that time, the free time I had was spent just typing on a computer, transcribing all these interviews. And I feel like looking back at it, I could have, asked a friend or maybe got someone else to help be a producer and bring on another creative partner on the project, and they could have helped out with something like that. So you can't spend your whole life making one movie. At some point you got to wrap. And then after that, I still had to organize my footage and kind of go through everything before I could really edit that.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, when it does come to editing, there's the old mantra of you got to be able to kill your babies. Obviously, hundreds of hours of footage. People who shoot narrative films, who don't have nearly as much footage to go through as a documentary does. Those guys still have trouble trimming it down. What do you do to keep yourself from having because I'm sure there's tons and tons of beautiful shots and great lines and moments between the characters. What do you do to decide what to keep and what to cut out so you don't end up with a 4-hour movie?
So it was really just kind of I'll always focus on the story, So I started out with just an outline, pretty much, and like I said earlier, the alternate good news versus alternating bad news, and this race kind of lent itself to that structure nicely, because there's a time in the race, he's feeling good, he's running, everything's happy. Then he's getting kind of tired, it's hot out, his feet are sore, like that's another.
His toenails are falling off.
Yeah, his toenails are falling off. Yeah, and because it worked out like that. The structure of the movie was somewhat already in place. And it's really just kind of making sure it's always interesting and kind of keeping in line with the story. I had a version of the movie that was maybe 58 minutes long. We ended up cutting that down to like 45. I had my wife watch that 58-minute version, and like she kind of helped like trim it down. It's always nice to have someone else look at your project to help tell you what's wrong, because sometimes you get into it and you might fall in love with stuff that's not as good, the kill your babies moment.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is that when you're so absorbed in something and you know the background and, other stuff that happened that might not be on camera, everything seems so important. And, you're kind of in love with this footage and the subject matter anyways. So it's kind of hard to step back and say, what is somebody who doesn't know anything about this or necessarily give a crap about it? What are they going to find interesting? So it sounds like in your case, it was getting your wife to watch it and say, all right, this is boring. You need to shorten it or cut it out or something.
Yeah, totally. And I was tempted to include a scene where someone kind of explains what ultra running is like, but I feel like my audience is going to be, ultra runners are going to be part of the audience too. So you don't want to bore those people. And I also don't think the concept of ultra running is that hard for people to understand.
Right. It's a whole different I mean, most people can't understand the mentality because it's such a extreme, form of athletic endeavor. But the basic concept of he's going to run 100 miles, people can grasp that.
Yeah. And that there was one scene early in the movie when he's packing for the trip with his mom, and his mom is going through the binder. She's like, "I'm gonna look at this important stuff. Look at this stuff." And then he comes out of the closet with this, I think it's a vuvuzela, and he blows his horn. He's like, "Oh, we have to take this. This is awesome." And when I shot that, I thought that was hilarious because it was such a great character building moment between Jason and his mom. His mom's the organized, pragmatic one, and he's kind of a little more fun and flexible.
Right.
But when I screened it to people, I don't think they thought it was as funny as I did. Probably because I was there in that moment and I knew them, and it was kind of like, oh, what a fun moment. But on screen, I didn't really play out as funny as I thought it was.
Right. Now, I guess would also be part of the editing process, and you were just talking about having someone explain what ultra marathon running is. Talk about some lessons you learned about the difference between showing and telling. Because like you said, you could have somebody in the first 10 minutes say, ultra marathon running is when you do blah, 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 and blah. But in a movie like this, people can actually watch that happen and figure it out for themselves as it goes along. They'll figure it out. They don't need to be spoon fed it. So what were some things, that's one example. Was there anything else where, you were thinking, is there a way to explain this through visuals rather than having to actually talk about it?
I wanted to explain his visual impairment like as visually as possible. That's one thing I wanted to show. Like when I was talking to him, he told me that even like he doesn't always open his mail. He often waits for it to accumulate, then he'll go through it in one day and open it, just because it's kind of a challenging concept, or too challenging to like read every piece of mail. I originally wanted to actually shoot a scene of him doing that, just because I think that would really kind of illustrate what he deals with pretty well. I ended up, instead of going through the scene, or just him going through his morning routine, or he puts on a headlamp, because just so he can like see where things are around his house a little bit easier. And most people wouldn't wear a headlamp unless they're outside at night, but he wears one around his house.
Right, he needs it to find the bathroom and go down the stairs and not trip over the dog.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like that moment was a pretty key showing, not telling. Probably an obvious one. I think during the race, I was able to have moments where I captured one really moment that I'm really happy with, where a guide, where he's like telling, at night he runs with the guide to help show him, don't trip over this rock here, or like don't go left, go right. He was kind of showing a guide how to do that, or telling her how to do that. I think that worked out pretty well too.
Okay. Yeah, I thought a lot of those elements were explained really well, without beating people over the head with it.
Right.
So, I did want to ask you, because I don't think it's mentioned in the movie. In the movie, spoiler alert, he finishes the race. I think you say at the end, 8 people started the race, but only 4 finished.
Oh yeah.
Where did he place?
He was fourth.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So, wow. So they all had 60 hours and 51 was the most anyone needed.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
pretty funny.
It's weird because you said at the beginning of the movie that people had attempted it before, but never finished. And obviously, 50% of the people in this race dropped out. But it seemed it was kind of funny to me that this thing that apparently had never been able to be accomplished before, 4 people did finish it. And there wasn't somebody who was like, oh, we got 30 minutes and another 2 miles to go. Is he going to make it? Everybody cleared by a fairly good margin. So, I mean, I guess that just goes to a credit to their training regimen.
And well, the race is also pretty new. I think the people who attempted it in the past maybe weren't as experienced runners.
Okay.
So I think that's why we had so many finishers that year.
Okay. Now it was a point of pride. It's like, I'm going to finish that one. I'm going to be the first one to do it.
Yeah. And actually, the next year, this past February 2016, Jason ran the 50-mile option. There was an option to run 50 miles or the whole. And he ran the 50-mile, and he won the 50-mile.
Oh, wow.
He set a new course record. So
awesome. Congrats to him.
Yeah.
So you got this film. It's finished, and now you're getting ready to distribute it out on the. Well, how are you doing that? I assume the festival circuit.
Actually, I don't really think it's much of a festival movie. I did submit to a couple film festivals, just 5 festivals, but I don't really think I need them to really sell this movie. I think I already have an audience somewhat pretty clearly defined. I think before I talk about distribution, I did make one, I think, pretty big mistake with this movie. So I came pretty close. So we had a premiere party in Colorado in late October.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and I didn't really create a Facebook page until a couple of days before that event. I didn't really start marketing it. I didn't have a website up or anything. If I could do it again, I think I would have maybe at least created a Facebook page for the movie back in January, back when I was, even before the race began. I think the best time to market your movie is before you actually shoot.
Now, as soon as you think about it, as soon as you know it's going to happen, you start getting people interested.
Yeah, like there's this one Instagram account. It's called Lapse the movie, where this girl it's kind of Instagramming about like her process of getting her independent feature developed, and she's like, they're barely in the process of it. Like, I think she had posted recently that they like hire a DP or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And she has like 5,000 followers on Instagram.
Wow.
She's like, yeah, talk about building your audience. Like, so when it comes time to releasing her movie, she has some sort of base.
Right. Well, and that's that can certainly be the case. Like like say she needs to do some crowdfunding. You need to be prepared and have an audience built up for when you need to ask them to do something. And like you said, in your case, you wanted people to come out to the premiere, but you hadn't built up that interest and that fan base of people saying, when can we see this thing? So, when you need people to contribute to your Kickstarter or, show up as extras on stage or attend the premiere or something, you want to already have people, who are excited to see this thing happen and, are looking for an opportunity to help out. So that's interesting.
Yeah, that was a pretty key lesson, I think, from this experience.
But now you've remedied that. Now you have Facebook, you have Twitter, you have Instagram. Do you want to go ahead and give those addresses?
Yeah, the Facebook page is just Running Vision. Twitter is just @RunningVision. And Instagram is Running Vision Movie. Okay. And there's also a website, runningvisionmovie.com.
What platform? Oh, that's the website?
Yeah, runningvisionmovie.com.
Runningvisionmovie.com. Okay.
Our movie is available for video on demand from Vimeo on April 21st.
Okay, cool. And so it will be available on demand, and you've already started, the push for that with the social media. You learned from the premiere, and now you're out there promoting it.
Yeah, that's right. I feel like I couldn't, replace that extra that year of production that could have been time to build an audience earlier, but
going ahead as soon as you realize that, going ahead and starting then rather than waiting a couple weeks. The sooner you start, the better. So
yeah, oh yeah, of course.
Nip it in the bud as best you can.
Yeah.
So like you said, you're only doing a couple festivals, which in my experience from talking to festival directors for this show and everything, you're in kind of a weird time as far as the length of the movie. Most festival directors say it's like an 8 to 15 minute is the ideal length for a short one. And then longer than that, you kind of need to be in the feature length, like over 70 minutes. Things that are like 20, 30, 45 minutes. It's kind of this weird, do we want to show this one movie or do we want to show 5 other people's short movies? So I can see where the festival circuit might not be the easiest road for you. So you decided to go on demand.
Yeah, on demand. We are setting up some screenings, just, some in North Carolina and some around the country as well. So some of the screenings are going to be free as well. I'm partnering with some running stores to screen after a fun run, for example. But I feel like that's just another way of helping build an audience. I would love to have it in movie theaters, but I think with this movie there is some residual value because it is such a niche audience with the visual impairment side and the running side. But I think I just got to get the word out there, get people to know about it, even if it is giving away free tickets now.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah. You said that you know the audience and it's a very specific audience, and I like the way that you've identified that. Did you figure that out? I mean, did you know that ahead of time? Because that seems like it might have been kind of a gimme, but was it something that you weren't sure of until you had finally edited the movie and said, okay, this is who this is going to appeal to?
I know some people might be thinking like, does the visual impairment crowd watch movies? And like, yeah, there are different degrees of like, some people are just lights out blind. Some people can see mostly, but it's just kind of an extra challenge. And I will at some point release an audio assisted version of the movie where it's kind of like an extra narrator narrating some of the action.
Right. Okay. No, that's a good thought. I've heard people say that if you take the extra time to do what is it? Like on YouTube for people who are deaf, if you take the time to do the subtitles, those people actually get huge boosts in their videos because, that's a whole audience that's not being served by these millions of videos out there. And they're like, oh, somebody finally catered to us. So, particularly with a documentary that appeals to people with an impairment to kind of cater to that, that'll be a big boost for you, I think.
Yeah, totally. I think it'll be a good moment. I'm also kind of hoping maybe 5 years down the line, there's some kid who gets diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa, and the doctor tells him he can't work, can't go to law school, can't become a doctor, and then maybe he'll go watch the movie and might get inspired to do something else.
No, that's awesome, and again, it's a really awesome movie for people out there. Running Vision. If you're watching this anytime after the next 2 or 3 weeks, it should be available on demand on Vimeo, so you can check it out. Or hopefully, like you said, maybe I like that idea of showing it in running stores.
Oh yeah,
that's just really clever. I like that idea.
Yeah, some stores have spaces to screen it with, and then there's one store that's actually partnering with a brewery nearby, and they have a big kind of back room with the screen set up.
Oh, nice. Which one's that?
I'm partnering with the Fleet Feet store.
Okay.
It's a Fleet Feet store in Carborough.
Okay. What's the brewery? Is that Yesteryear?
Yeah, I'm impressed you know that. Yesteryears, yeah.
Yeah, well, they're right next door to the Carborough Arts Center where they had the Carborough Film Festival last year, and I covered that. So I got to go over. There was a break, and I went over and had a beer and watched part of a football game over there. It's a cool place. They got good beer. I did not realize there was a Fleet Feet there.
Oh yeah, they're just right.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks, Taylor, for taking the time to chat with me. We've been at this for a little over an hour, so I'm sorry to keep you so long. But I thought it was so cool to hear what you had to go through to get this made and share some of your experience and knowledge you learned with the audience.
Oh, yeah, it's my pleasure.
Was there anything else you wanted to touch on? Any other bits of advice you wanted to pass on that maybe we didn't hit?
Start marketing early. Don't be afraid to don't go at it by yourself. Have at least an assistant, if not an extra team member. I really wish I did that. Would have saved me some hours. And yeah. Right.
Well, you get it right the next time, huh?
That's true. Yeah. There are times when I think of this movie as like almost like a giant magnifying glass on myself as like a filmmaker in terms of my strengths, my weaknesses. So I feel like yeah, and also any other aspiring filmmakers out there, just go out there and shoot stuff, and you'll learn a lot.
Awesome. Well, I think you turned in a great first documentary, and I can't wait to see the next one you do. And in fact, I can't wait to go to a running store or wherever you're screening this and see it.
Dude, we'll set one up in Raleigh, and I'll let you know.
Awesome. Well, thank you, man, for taking the time to talk to me. You gave the information for people to find the movie, the Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram, website. Do you have a personal website or a Twitter account you want to share?
I have samples of my work at TaylorShainFilms.com. Yeah, you guys go check it out. Hopefully there's some cool stuff on there.
Okay, cool. I'll put that in the show notes. People can go check it out.
All right, cool. Thank you, man. It was fun.
Thank you. Thank you for being on the show. And thank you for everybody who's watching. This has been another episode of Local Film Talk. Of course, you can watch the shows on our YouTube channel, which is just the Local Film Talk YouTube channel. You can go and subscribe to that. If you don't have time to sit down and watch these episodes, you can always listen to them by downloading the Local Film Talk podcast on iTunes. We also post these over on our site, trianglelife.tv. Let's see, Twitter, @LocalFilmTalk. And if you have any questions, comments, or concern, you can email us at localfilmtalk@gmail.com. So thank you again, Taylor Shain, for joining me. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and we will see you next week.